in Iraq that will be, for decades to come, an issue that the world will have to deal with.
Absolutely. And this is one of the really outrageous situations about trying to get information about this war, because even today, if you go to the official DoD website, what you will find is a number around 30,000 wounded. But that is only the wounded in combat. Now, the number of fatalities, which is approaching 4,000, is wounded in combat and non-combat. But if you want to find the non-combat wounded, and that includes, for example, soldiers who are injured when they're driving their vehicles at night because it's unsafe to drive during the day, soldiers who are wounded when they are being transported between one place and another, who never would have been there otherwise, it's much larger. It's more than double. And that is a number which is very hard to get. We had to use the Freedom of Information Act to get access to that number. It is impossible to sort of underestimate how difficult it is to get hold of information that should be completely in the public domain.
Joseph Stiglitz, I want to go to that point of using the Freedom of Information Act. You found out through this Freedom of Information Act request the government was keeping a second set of books?
That's right. I mean, one of the very disturbing things is that we went to war for democracy, and yet democracy is more than just having periodic elections. It really involves informed citizens being able to have perspectives on the important decisions. But to be informed, you have to know what is really going on, and that's why it was, so upsetting that we had to use the Freedom of Information Act to find out this, or to find out, for instance, that while the government was saying, the president was saying, we'll supply all the equipment that the military needs, back in early 2005, there were urgent requests for MRAPs, these vehicles that will resist the IEDs, these explosive devices, and protect our soldiers. But because of wanting to keep the apparent cost down, they refused to order them. Of course, the total cost, and this is one of the important points we make in our book, the total cost is not just the upfront cost, but the cost you have to face for decades later in terms of the injuries, and of course the cost to the families. So being penny wise and pound foolish means our country is suffering because of that kind of economic decision.
But I want to stay on this second set of books. So what is being told to the public is only half of the injured. Is that right, Linda Bilmes?
That's right. And last year, after I published a paper on the cost to veterans, the then Assistant Secretary for Health at the Pentagon phoned me and phoned my dean and said, "Where did you get these numbers?" And I said, "I got them from your website, which we now have access to." And he said, "Oh, that can't be." And I said, "Well, look at your website." And he said, "Well, fax me my own website." So I literally faxed him his own website. And then he said, "Oh," but this was the Assistant Secretary of Health at the DoD, Winkenwender, who was retired around the time that Gates came in. A number of people from that department were retired.
But then they took down those websites.
Yeah, but then then they took down the websites, and there were websites at the Department of Veterans Affairs that were keyed into those websites, and then they directed the Department of Veterans Affairs to change the veterans' websites. And we only found out about this because hundreds of veterans from all over the country started emailing me and calling me and saying, "Have you seen what's going on?" So, I mean, we were in the situation where we were academics doing this research. Veterans from all over the country watching these websites were coming to tell us this information. But this kind of trickery has extended both to the budget, and to the numbers in the war. And we see it right now in the president's proposal for the FY09 veterans budget, where ostensibly the budget is being increased by $5 billion. But in fact, if you look at the fine print, they're hoping to recoup over $3 billion by increasing the copays and all the fees on the veterans who need to use the services. And so if you actually net it out, it's only a $2 billion increase, which is less when you consider the cost of living adjustment than they had last year.
And you also detail in your book the same kind of flim-flam going on with the soldiers who are recruited into the military, a bonus pay that they get, that then if they happen to be injured too soon when they get on the battlefield, they then have to pay back.
Yeah, I found that just absolutely astounding. You know, you're doing this research and you find things that I say, you know, Linda, are you sure? This can't be. But they said, you know, the view is they signed a contract to serve for 3 years. The fact they get blown up after 1 month means they haven't fulfilled their contract.
And so what happened?
They have to pay back the money.
Congress is changing this. They've intervened to change this. But, I mean, Congress has been intervening to change some of these problems. But right now, there are 18 pieces of legislation before Congress and a number that have been passed based on our recommendations.
Another example that sort of highlights this kind of, you know, some of this may be bureaucratic misbehavior, but still it highlights the kinds of problems our veterans are facing.
It also highlights the total incompetence of the people that are running the operation.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things, you know, they check out helmets and other equipment because they want them to be responsible. But they get they lose their helmet in an explosion. You know, they're shipped out, they're disabled, they're in concussion. Somebody in the military will send them a bill for their helmet.
There was a GAO study on that, which is unbelievable, about veterans being, hundreds and hundreds of veterans being chased around the country for small amounts of money that they allegedly owe, mostly related to pieces of equipment that they lost during serious injuries.
We're talking to Linda Bilmes and Joseph Stiglitz in this national broadcast exclusive as they reveal the costs of war. A cost, they say, is a conservative estimate. The $3 trillion war is the title of their book, The True Cost of the Iraq Conflict. We'll come back in our conversation with them in a minute.
وبعض من الغناء بكاء فجراح الحسين بعض جراح وبصدري من الأسى كربلاء فجراح الحسين بعض جراح وبصدري من الأسى كربلاء